the one and only Tom Lange.
Tom Lange, a legendary LAPD detective, spent years solving some of LA's most infamous serial killer cases, including the Southside Killers and Hillside Strangler. Today, he shares his experience hunting down the city's most dangerous criminals.
You had to be thinking they're related somehow.
Hillside Strangler, Skid Row Stabber.
Like they're connected, they're communicating, but no. There's 8 different killers on the loose simultaneously.
In Los Angeles, somebody or a team has been murdering girls. Lots of them.
You think they realize that there's all these killings going on that they think, I can not get caught, I'm gonna kill some more, and I'm gonna get in the news.
In the 70s, you had multiple bodies showing up in Los Angeles.
You know, without my name, I wanna compete with all, because you're saying there's all these killings are going on at this time in the 80s.
How do you shut that off at the end of the day? Because that means the killing ends and this monster is put behind bars, or preferably put to death.
When you're working serial killers and homicide in general, you get left alone.
Did you ever feel threatened by these guys once your name was in the paper and attached to these cases? Did they ever find a way to threaten you?
Aren't you more in the mind of the serial killer?
We stand in the shoe of the victim, which is true because no one else does and no one else will.
I'm amazed that lots of the serial killer cases are always dudes, and I imagine it's because they're the most vulnerable.
When you have 2 serial killing cases like the Hillside Strangler and the Skid Row Stabber, who does the media care about? They care about young girls getting kidnapped, brutalized, and dumped in the hills around Los Angeles.
All right, so I'm lucky enough to be with the 2 of the stars of the Netflix hit docuseries, American Manhunt, O.J. Simpson, the one and only Tom Lange over here, and the one and only Kato Kalin. Welcome to 1 Degree of Scandalous.
Come on, Tom, give me one. Don't
with
leave
Tom
me out.
Kato.
Snails there.
You know, it's always cool when I get you 2 guys in the same room, right? We did this about a year ago, and I was telling Tom on the way over here, Kato, that we still get we could probably get 5,000-6,000 views a day on that episode. People are just fascinated by it.
When I walked in, I just said my social media still. It just goes crazy. The fascination. Netflix brought the fascination back of the OJ trial. So
yeah,
it's been incredible, and everybody wants to know questions for you, and they want your information. I gotta give out Tom's information. So I go to Tom Zenner. I go, can you get Tom Lange? You know.
Hey, by the way, I need to ask you something.
Yeah.
A fellow police chief asked me to ask you something. So I'll ask you that at the end of the show. But you know, it's always so insane to me the fact that the way you guys met. You know, that first time with the knock on the bungalow door and how the world changed after that. This episode obviously is about serial killers. We're going to do multiple episodes with Tom about that. He's the foremost authority, but it's got to be good when you guys get together in a room.
Yeah.
Colorful.
Well, you know, Tommy, you bring up serial killers, and Tom Lange and Tom Zenner. So I watched the Netflix show twice, actually, because I thought it was fascinating. You say something in there, has to do something with serial killers. You say, well, actually, you go, we are in the shoes of the victim that we look into. But for serial killers, you're not in the shoes of the victim. Aren't you more in the mind of the serial killer?
Good point. Yeah, no, it is. We were talking earlier about that. These little things tend to add up. A little bit of this, it's all circumstantial. That's where you begin with circumstantial evidence and you build from there. And like I alluded to earlier, every case has 2 or 3 little things that really don't matter, but when you got 15 or 20 little things, it tends to add up circumstantially to a suspect. And you have to keep an open mind. You document all of this stuff and you don't forget it. But the good point is what you're trying to say is that we stand in the shoe of the victim, which is true because no one else does and no one else will.
Right.
And so you have to realize that and really give a damn about what you do or don't do it. Simple as that.
Yeah, exactly. That's a great point.
Because I always go back to Manhunter. Thomas Harris wrote the first, you know, the whole Hannibal Lecter thing was, and Will Peterson plays the forensic psychologist and says, or cop, and just says, so Lecter says, so you're smarter than me, you're saying, how Will? He goes, no, I'm not smarter. You just have disadvantages. And Lecter goes, what's that? He goes, you're insane, which I'm sure serial killers must have insanity.
They're sociopaths. High level, I call them high level sociopaths. No psychologist will ever tell you there are different levels of sociopaths. In my mind, there are, because as we talked earlier, not all sociopaths are killers. A lot of them are leaders of big business, politicians, entertainment industry, Cato, you know.
Yeah.
Present company accepted. No, but there's a lot of somebody say up to 5 million sociopaths. It doesn't mean they're all serial killers.
So
but that's what you look at.
I walk in here today with Tom, and we go, what's the desk? I see nothing but pictures and serial killing, shots of actual serial killers. And unfortunately, we're also seeing people that have been killed. So I go to Tom Zenner. I go, Tom, he's in so many serial killing cases. What are you going to focus on?
Yeah. Well, great question. We're going to talk about just his career and some of the methods and just ways they went about solving these cases. But we also want to hit the big ones. Kato, on an upcoming episode, we're going to do the Wonderland Murders, which hit movie, multiple hit docuseries or multiple podcasts done on it. And Tom wrote a best-selling book on it too. So the Wonderland Murders, we're going to hit some of the other more prominent ones. Today, we're going to focus on the Southside Killings, which was a series of multiple serial killers operating at the same time with a similar MO for a victim. So we're going to get to that, the details of that. Wow. And Kato, you talked about Tom having to get into the mind of the killer, which he actually do, and representing the families and the victims. But Tom, how do you shut that off at the end of the day? Because you're asked to do a very, very difficult job, and there's only one outcome that means success, and that's solving it. Because that means the killing ends and this monster is put behind bars or preferably put to death. So there's a lot of pressure to solve these cases. You have a family. There's a part of you that has a normal life as well. Did you have to find a way to turn that off, or is it just all-encompassing?
I think everybody is different. If you talk to my wife, she'll tell you that I might be into this a little too much. That's just my personality. It doesn't mean that I enjoy people getting murdered or anything else. I find it fascinating. I find it a challenge. And it's tough. I will wake up, and I am the type that wakes up and thinks about little things in the middle of the night. And I've been known to run downstairs to my office and jot something down because we've all been there. You think of something in a dream in the middle of the night, and you forget about it the next morning.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So I don't know why that happens. It happened to me a lot when I was in the Marine Corps. That's where it started, for reasons we don't even need to get into, but that's a different story. I write little things down. If you go to my office, I have notes everywhere. It's just the way I am. It's just my personality. As far as turning it off, I don't feel pressure. I don't feel I'm under stress. Basically, when you're working serial killers and homicide in general, you get left alone by the brass, which is really important, by your own boss, just wants to keep abreast. Why is that? It's because nobody really knows what a homicide cop really does or goes through, how he does things. There's no real manual. There's right here, I've got a manual here on serial killers, but it's all my experiences and how I do things. It doesn't mean like you're going to do them the same way. Everybody's different. So if you can respect yourself, you can respect what you do, and that's where I am.
Have you ever had one of those moments? I know what you mean when you, in your sleep. I keep a notepad and pencil next to my bed for jokes. Have you had that moment where you go, "That's it"? In a case where you that holy shit moment. This is what happened. Has that ever happened to you? While you're just laying in bed, it's like you just can't sleep, and you go, "I just solved it."
To some extent, and I've got a bunch of those at home. In fact, I'm looking at another book with a lot of those things in it that are kind of offbeat for a police investigation. Some are humorous, but I know what you're saying, and I have that habit. And to me, I think it's a good habit to have. Don't just kiss it off. If you kiss that off, you're going to kiss off other things, and you're not going to really do what you're supposed to be doing. You gotta. I hate to say the same thing, but this out of the box thinking, it's very important. And if you don't have it, you just might not get where you want to go.
Right.
Yeah, because there's no handbook that you get on how to solve a serial killer case. You got to have some unconventional methods. You got to have street smarts, instincts, and think outside the box. And you said that you love putting puzzles together.
Yeah.
And this is one kind of odd puzzle, that has lives affected, and it's very important that you solve this puzzle. But that's what it is finding this clue connected. How do these relate? Connect the dots.
You mentioned about writing things down. That's what this book is. My game plan for instruction in serial killing.
Right.
That I put together in the 90s and still put together today.
I'll get a camera shot.
Everything in here, I wrote this myself.
This is what Tom's talking about. He brought in all his files and notes here, if you can see. There's pages of them all over of different serial killing cases. And I was actually reading it before when I got here. Tom let me go through it, and I'm amazed. Both Toms here. I'm amazed that lots of the serial killer cases are always prostitutes, and I imagine it's because they're the most vulnerable, and there's no defense, and there's a easy way to pick them up. So in a lot of the cases, the Southside Killings, for example, it's mainly just hookers, right?
Basically, it is, and there's a lot of reasons for that. What we found in these serial killings on the South Side, where there are several copycats, you have to understand that, especially in any high-profile case. Prostitutes are easy targets.
Right.
They're usually they have a pimp, somebody who handles them. They're usually always addicted to one drug or another. They don't really take care of themselves. Some are alcoholics. They're there for one reason and one reason only. They're expendable. And these killers, these 6 killers that we're looking at here, know all that stuff. They know there is little chance that anybody's going to take a close look at them. And that's the way it was for a long time until we put a task force together in the mid-'80s.
Right.
But this is the same example we used earlier when you have 2 serial killing cases like the Hillside Strangler and the Skid Row Stabber. Who does the media care about? Who are they going to run to? They don't care about transients in Skid Row. They care about young girls getting kidnapped, brutalized, and dumped nude on the hills around Los Angeles. Same with the prostitutes. They're low-value targets to these people.
Right. Do you think that that these killers, do you think they ever were with that prostitute before the killing? Like they've had them and then they came back another time and then they killed them? Did they probably have sex with them at one time without killing him, then came back?
There's the possibility. We've never really delved into that, and I'm sure that that's possible. But if you look like Samuel Little, he died a couple of years ago in Dale. I think he was 80 years old. He has admitted to, and it's been shown, like 92 murders from Florida to California. Now, he finished up here in California. 92 human beings. But he has no regard. None of these suspects have any regard for their victims as human beings.
Right.
Yeah, they probably don't look at them as humans.
They don't look at them as human
Low
beings.
IQ people?
Yeah.
Low IQ, and that's the sociopath coming out to some degree, but they've never thought about these people. You look at these people, how they grew up. They didn't come from wealthy families.
Right.
They're not overly highly educated.
Right.
Too many of them held a job for too long.
Right.
They didn't do a whole lot for society. Let's just put it that way. Yeah. And they couldn't care less about their victims.
Yeah, they did not have model upbringings. Probably a lot of them abused. Not that that's an excuse, of course.
My dad had said to me one time, Tom, and you know this, he said, when my IQ hits 50, he said, sell.
Great advice.
I go, Dad,
did you have a margin call on that?
I go, Dad, why are you saying that to me? You're my dad.
Yeah, it's okay. Prostitutes and then young children, kids. You know, in so many of these serial cases, it's kids too. And that's what makes it even more heinous. You know, it's almost like a cat and mouse game between you, the detective, and your team, and these killers. And in between is the media. Did you use the media to your advantage often, like sending out subliminal messages? Because they're going to read it. These guys are probably obsessed with the stories themselves, and they love the fact that you can't catch them. So would you send out messages through the media? And did you ever feel threatened by these guys once your name was in the paper and attached to these cases? Did they ever find a way to threaten you?
As far as the media goes, they've got a job to do, and you have to respect that. Tell them something, but don't tell them anything. It's what we like to say, anything of relevance, because you have to keep your evidence close to the vest. We talked earlier about signatures and that type of thing in serial killing. You don't want this certain information out to the public. You got to be careful on how you deal with that, because there's certain people you could trust and others you can't. The media has changed from 40 years ago to today a lot. Today, there's more filling in the blanks on your own than there was back then. Before, it was straight news. They wanted a story, and they would put out what you said. They didn't play games. I basically trust the media, but you have to be careful on what you share because, again, they have a job too. I've known reporters who have sat on things, but they would also like a call if something broke. That type of stuff happens.
Yeah.
And that's you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours type of thing. Nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, I have a two-part question in this one. The Southside Killer, the serial case on the Southside Killers, 8 of them, correct?
Well, there's 6 South Side and 2 West Side, so all same time, operating at the same time.
8 of them. So, I watch a lot of these TV shows and even films. They always show cops, usually female cops, dressed up possibly as prostitutes to catch the killer. So if you dress them up and they're in South Side of LA, or they're on the bad area of LA, right, at this time?
South Central LA.
South Central.
Yeah.
So they're police women dressed as prostitutes. Aren't they easy to spot because there aren't the pimp? The pimp would know, hey,
She's new to this block or
she's
something.
new. Who
right?
is this now? So I would think that they're in danger.
Okay, good point. And on that point, we did have undercover women working as prostitutes.
Right.
In this particular case, the South Side, we had 3 police women working undercover. It's very dangerous. They worked for several weeks. They never were able to identify a killer, but there were altercations with all 3, and there were shootings in all 3 where the woman had to shoot to defend herself. We were very close by, but in those instances, not close enough. It only takes 2 seconds for somebody to get a knife in them.
Right.
Or to get thrown to the ground and stomped on. These women put up with a lot. And it got so bad because one reason is what you said, they're not recognized on the street. It's not going to fly sooner or later. This is a short-term thing.
Right.
They're going to maybe a day or 2 and then move on because the pimp is going to notice that somebody's there and they're going to get hurt. It got so hairy for these 3 police women, and after these shootings, we had to pull them entirely. So we just took them off the street.
So do they actually, explain to me, do they actually get in a car with something? Do they actually?
No.
So how do they, if they're on the street, how do they?
Right, because how do you get information?
How do you
right?
get information without, if they're walking the street, someone's going to notice that they never get in a car. They never do anything.
Right, they get ratted out. Yeah.
Yeah. So
It's again, it's a short-term deal, okay?
Yeah.
We don't know how long. You had so many killings. We looked at over 100 killings during this stretch. It goes back about 4 or 5 years, 5 years, that we were looking at. And again, there was not a whole lot of investigation done, and I'll lay it out there the way it is, simply because these are prostitutes. Nobody cared. Until there's a whole bunch of them, and you got all of these things happening. So then you try everything. You want to put this in the mix. It's a hit and miss. Maybe we'll get something, maybe we won't. It's very dangerous. Let me put it that way.
Right.
But you have to try what you have to try. If these women didn't want to do it, we're not going to force them to do this. They did this. They volunteered to do this. Again, they were armed, and they were told to defend themselves, and they did because there were shootings in all 3 cases.
Right.
But it was that dangerous, we had to pull them.
And you're with a team of detectives doing this, right?
Yeah.
So you came, when you arrested, you came face to face with these criminals.
You mean the
Killers?
The
serial
killers.
killers?
Yeah.
Okay, good point. Initially, we had, like I said, 6 on the South Side,
Right.
and 2 on the West Side. There's a difference in MO. The South Side were killing prostitutes, mainly black prostitutes. The West Side rapists were elderly women. Elderly women was part of the MO that they would kill and rob, type of thing, and follow beforehand. A entirely different situation than this, but it occurred at the same time, roughly in the same areas. So you had a lot of bad guys walking the street at the same time. These serial killers were among us. We just didn't know who until the first 2, Crane and Siebert, were arrested. This is before DNA. This is in the mid-'80s. One of our guys working South Homicide identified Lewis Crane as a suspect. He was eventually arrested and convicted, I believe, of 5 of the murders. This was because of witness testimony, basic evidence leading him to the crimes. He was killing women in his neighborhood who were also prostitutes, who he hated for whatever reason these people hate. I don't know. His brother turned him over after he was arrested. Again, he was convicted. Daniel Siebert was Caucasian.
Mm-hmm.
He's a white guy who trolled for black prostitutes wearing an afro wig in South Central L.A.
Jeez. I think they did a show on this guy when they caught him, and I think, if I'm right, he actually murdered a family in Tennessee.
Daniel Siebert, we had him for 2 murders in South Central. it got hot down there because of all of what we
Right.
were doing and the stakeouts. The body count was rising substantially. So you're right. Siebert took off. He ended up in Talladega, Alabama,
Oh, Alabama, okay.
where he killed a family of 4. On the way there, they believe he stopped in Ohio and killed another prostitute. But Siebert is one of those people who's probably good for a lot more than he was filed on for. Back in Alabama, he got the death penalty for killing that family of 4. He alluded to the murders back here, which we could have tried for him back here, but we didn't even go for it because Alabama does things a little differently than California.
Death penalty, right?
Let's just
Yes.
lay our cards out the way they are.
Yeah,
True.
it is.
He got the death penalty. He would have been executed before we'd even been to court on this guy. It's
So
as
he's dead.
simple as that.
He's dead. He got
But he
executed.
died of cancer.
He died
on
of
death
cancer
row. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
in custody back in Alabama. But you're right. They would have put him to death before we even got to our preliminary hearing back here. So we didn't even bother with that. We were able to clear those cases, though. How many more did he kill? We'll probably never know.
Hey, I saw my cousin Vinny. Justice is different there.
Yeah.
in Alabama. Yeah, it's crazy because 12, at least 12, but who knows, right? You never know
Well,
with
with
these
any of
guys.
you know, we have no idea to get an accurate count.
Yeah. Yeah. And the crazy thing about this is we're talking we have a photo here with 6 of these suspects. There's another 2, similar MO. And you had to be thinking they're related somehow, like they're connected, they're communicating. But no, there's 8 different killers on the loose simultaneously. And this didn't even count what was going on in Orange County, in the Valley, Toolbox, freeway murders. It goes on and on and on. Trash
Hillside.
bag murders.
Do you? I'm not joking when I say this. Do you think that they read like Daniel Siebert reads about there's been a killing a prostitute that they say, I'm going to top this guy to get in the news because they love themselves. Do you think they have like I guess competition, but do you think they realize that there's all these killings going on that they think I can not get caught. I'm going to kill some more and I'm going to get in the news, without my name. I want to compete with all, because you're saying there's all these killings are going on at this time in the 80s.
Who knows? Who knows
Right?
if they want to make it a competition? And I wouldn't be surprised.
Right. I mean, they're thinking they can
just
get
think-
away with it.
It's they possibly, but this is just a total disregard for life. And like in Crane's spot and in Little, Lonnie Franklin, Chester Turner, they despised prostitutes for whatever reason, whatever's in their mind, and they hated them. And killing them is no more than stepping on a bug.
Right.
They couldn't care less, and there's nothing wrong with killing prostitutes. Besides, nobody really cares. The cops aren't doing anything.
Yeah. You got this guy, Chester Turner. All right. Michael Hughes, Lewis Crane, Ivan Hill, Lonnie David Franklin, the Grim Sleeper, another one of those wacky nicknames. It's not easy to get away with murder, at least not right now. Kato watches all those shows, the forensic shows. It's hard to get away with murder. Now, not talking about bright killers here, not bright individuals, but was it just the environment, the area, the timing, night? There's a lot of murders to get away with. Was things just so different 40 years ago that it made it possible?
Yeah, in some regards. Again, no DNA. People were not carrying around cameras. There's a lot of the automated systems in play today that weren't back then. Everything was done manually. Today, everybody's got a camera. That wasn't true back then. Hitchhiking was a big deal. Murders were 3 times what they are today. I think I put out early in 1992, there was also 1,092 homicides in 1 year. Today, a good year in L.A. is a good year. There's no good years in murder. But there's like 330, I think, last year, a couple of years ago. That represents like a 75% decrease in the murder rate now, going back 40 years. You look, There was never anybody down there looking at these killings back then. The media today, there's more media than cops on the street.
Yeah.
Back then, there was hardly any media back then.
And
on
then
the
with
street.
X, everybody's a reporter, right?
Yeah.
If you see something suspicious
yeah.
or something
You didn't
crazy.
have any of
Cameras
that.
every street corner has cameras
gonna-
everywhere.
Yeah, and I'm going to continue to kill because nobody cares.
Yeah.
I'm just do what I want to do.
Mm-hmm.
I hate the bitch, and I'm going to do something about it.
Yeah, in their own minds, they can rationalize
Well,
it. And
yeah.
there's so many different ways they can do the murders, as we see in all these different cases.
The interesting part also is that we're also faced in these situations when nobody seems to care or whatever. There's a lot of these killings. You have copycats.
Yeah.
Some of these,
I guess that's part of the competition also.
Well,
Like a copycat wants to kill also.
depends on how you look at it. Yeah.
Yeah.
By other prostitutes, some of them,
Right.
by the tricks themselves. by they call them strawberries, these prostitutes who are under the influence and dependent on narcotics, by their own pimps, by other tricks. When you get a lot of publicity, the more publicity, the more copycats you get.
Right.
So that's one thing that could hang you up. That's why when we talk about linking is so important to differentiate a real serial killer from some nut job who just wants to kill because he can get away with it.
Now that you're retired, can you say that watching detective films, do you have informants? Do you actually have informants that you count on in the street, like for tips, paid tips? I'm not putting you on the spot to have you paid tips, but is it true that there are informants that you can trust that are actual criminals, but they're helping out?
Any informant is simply called as a paid informant. You can believe that.
Yeah.
I do. In one particular case, and I'll just say this and drop it, on the Laurel Canyon murder case, there is a person that has a lot of information. However, if you look at that case, that was in 1981. Everybody's gone. Everybody's dead.
Yeah.
Best time to write a book, by the way, when everybody is dead.
Mm-hmm.
That person's life is in danger. And so I don't even mention anything about that person. And this was very recent. Revelations sometimes come up. Doing these other things, I get calls from people.
Mm-hmm.
Most of them are crank calls or crank emails or whatever else. But this person came forward with some very valuable information on unknown suspects in the Laurel Canyon murders. They're not all dead.
That's the Wonderland murders.
The Wonderland murders.
Yeah.
They're not all dead. Let's just put it that way.
Wow.
Still,
so there are
today,
people.
to this day,
Yeah.
they're still not dead. Got it.
One, at least.
Okay.
Know him, know where he is, know a lot about him. If we were to activate this informant, I'm afraid that the way things are today, they might not even file on this person, the suspect. And it might cause further harm, including his or her
Life.
death.
Yeah. Life. Yeah.
So you just drop that.
That case never fails to fascinate. The Wonderland murders, the Laurel Canyon murders. And we're going to do an episode with Tom probably in about 2 weeks.
Yeah.
So much to get into on that one.
We had lunch earlier. And we were wondering, wait for our viewers to say, I could probably IMDb, but if Val Kilmer, A-list actor, I think he plays John Holmes in it.
Yeah.
Or
he was one of the stars, but that movie didn't do that well for some reason. I thought that movie would have been bigger, but this thing, there's been a lot of podcasts on it, and Tom wrote a book on it, so we're going to get into that. You know, Tom, I remember you telling me one time, with all these serial killers roaming around, that we'd be surprised by the number of women serial killers. Like, obviously not to the level of men, but no one would think there's women serial killers, but there are apparently.
Yeah, there are. It's very rare. I got a little blurb in here about women, and I allude to them. I looked into, I think there were 7 or 8 different serial killers who were women. We handled one of them in the Sunset Strip Killers, Carol Bundy, no relation.
Oh.
Carol Bundy and her partner, she had a male partner, and they were picking up men on Hollywood, right in this area we're in right now, West Hollywood, basically, off of Sunset. And they would pick these men up and women, a couple of prostitutes. But Carol would come on to them after Clark, her co-suspect, would set him up as her as a prostitute, and she'd be in the back seat, and Clark would have this guy in the front seat, and she would have I think it was a .25 caliber, and she would shoot him, kill him, and then they get rid of him. One incident, they picked up a prostitute to kill, and they did, and they decapitated her and put her head on a post at a freeway on-ramp right by Forest Lawn Cemetery for the oncoming traffic getting on the freeway early one morning, and the head of this prostitute was on this post. Weird things like this.
Wow.
Plus, Clark also had a fetish for dead women. They decapitated another and serving a search warrant. I did not personally handle this case. One of our other teams did, the Sunset Strip Killers. We found a severed head in his freezer at home that he had made up with women's makeup, lipstick, rouge, whatever, and would have, an easy way to put this,
Yeah, we get it.
Yeah.
I
sex
get it.
with the head, okay, from time to time out of the freezer. So Clark and Bundy, I believe she is now passed on. I don't know if he's around or not, but they were, of course.
I remember that. I do
convicted,
remember
I
the
think.
woman working with. Oh, she was, and she had a normal job, didn't she? If I recall.
Yeah, she was fairly easy to talk to. She was kind of admitted most of these things.
Oh, she was ice. I mean, the way she described it, Kato, was like talking about cleaning the bathroom last week or something.
Well,
I mean,
that's it. Women serial killers are much cleaner.
Yeah, but you had like Eileen Wernos.
Yeah, only woman to be executed, right?
Yeah, she was executed in Florida. She was killing truck drivers
Right.
because she didn't like them.
Well, also she killed the film with called Monster with Charlize Theron.
Mm-hmm.
She plays Eileen Rose. She killed the first killing she had was a gentleman that the wife said go out and have sex because the wife had cancer or something. I don't think that was embellished in the movie. That was that was the first killing, and she found out he was also a cop.
well,
And
it
then
also
that,
fits.
That was the whole gist of the movie. They had to catch this person. Turns out to be Arlene Warnos.
And then if you're a female serial killer, you're thinking, okay, where is it easy to get victims? Truck stops.
Yeah.
You go from truck stop to truck stop. Long haul
Act as the
truckers are
hooker.
pulling in.
Right.
Yeah.
They get
Easy. You're in the cab. Nobody knows. There's no security cameras out there.
What's interesting with these women, the MOs vary quite a bit. Rose West, a Gloucester House of Horrors killer with her husband Fred, they had a house of prostitution, and they would have the guests come in, and when they tried to escape, they would holding them as sex slaves. They'd kill them. Blanche Moore, New England, mid-70s. She was a serial killer. She killed her family, her father, her mother, her husband. She didn't stop there. And she even killed her minister just to kill. She was sentenced to death by lethal injection. The other one that I was looking at, Dorothy Puente, you remember her? She was an elderly woman, lived in Northern California.
well, she collected Social Security, right?
A boarding house, collecting
house.
the Social Security
Of
of
course,
her
yeah.
victims, and she'd murder the victims and bury them in the backyard.
Right. Yes, that was part of our Wrong Place, Wrong Time show. One of our.
So they're not unheard of, but they can be as vicious as anybody else.
Yeah.
Okay, so with the Southside Killings or that series of 8 killers running loose, you almost, because that's over a decade. So are you ever worried that, like, do you think some of these were copycats? Like some get it going and then the other ones pick it up. So then when you have all 8 arrested, you don't even know for sure that it's done.
Well, yeah, that's true. A lot of these guys, like Little and others, admitted to certain murders that you could verify. Now, the FBI was, after a while, when they had the behavioral science unit came in, they took part in trying to identify as many as they could. And even some instances, the killer would take them out to the locations, to the body dumps, and that was one way of corroborating that they killed them. But there are always those cases that go unsolved. A lot of these prostitutes in the South End don't have families. They had lousy childhoods. Maybe they ran away when they were young. There was nothing solid in their entire lifestyle other than being a prostitute. And that was one reason nobody seemed to care. So will we really know for certain about every single one? No. There's no way to possibly know.
You know, it's, Tom, in football now they're doing, if someone's got, was it CRT?
CTE?
CTE. I wonder if there's been autopsies of the brain of serial killers, of what they find in their brain.
No kidding. There has to be something
You would think,
missing.
right? They do it with CTE of people that have had injuries to their head. So I wonder if there's a certain pattern in the brain, if there's ever been autopsies on them.
Possibly. But if you look at psychologists and psychiatrists talking about serial killers and sociopaths, they really haven't nailed down what a true sociopath is. To me, I look at it a little differently. You can read, there's a lot of good books out on sociopaths. I really personally think there's different levels.
Mm-hmm.
The top level being the serial killer. O.J. Simpson, top level. Psychopath, denial of everything, total narcissist. If he does it once, he can do it again. Now with Nicole, you know better than anybody what happened with Nicole. If it wasn't then, it would be at another time that he would have done that. Because in my mind, I call them high-level sociopaths. Again, there are different sociopaths who would never think of killing someone.
Right.
They just don't have a conscience. Nobody knows for certain. They can't. Again, you read these books with these psychologists, and they will basically tell you, we don't have all the information. We don't know what's going on. As far as medicine goes, between today and 50 years from now, you're going to be amazed. We're not going to be here, but you'll be amazed at the difference by then.
So is identifying a serial killer different than identifying a killer?
Well, it depends. If you have a situation where you can link these cases, you look for motive. But that's one of the definitions of a serial killer, 2 or more with no apparent motive. As you work the case and develop a suspect, these things evolve. And you realize that, well, he didn't like prostitutes. He liked torturing little girls, like the Hillside and
Toolbox.
the Toolbox Killers and those types of things. Or Bonin, the Freeway Killer. Or someone like a Patrick Kearney, who knew that the cops didn't communicate with one another, so he'd kidnap them like from Pershing Square downtown or MacArthur Park downtown, transport his victims out to San Bernardino somewhere, kill them. He was a necrophiliac, so he'd have sex with the dead body, and then he would cut up the body, put the parts in trash bags, and dump along the freeways in another jurisdiction. Yet the crime began in L.A. He did that down in the beach cities also. Each beach city in L.A. around L.A. County has a different police department. They weren't talking.
Right.
They weren't talking with L.A. L.A. wasn't talking with them.
And the killing was called what? What serial case was that called?
That was the trash bag killer.
Trash bag killer. And he's
Patrick
caught.
Kearney.
Trash.
The worst one of all was probably in Orange County, and that was I to get his name here.
Was it the guy with the van?
These
no.
You guys do this thing while you're looking, Tom. It's like the BTK, bind, torture, kill. I think you guys come up with these names. Like
Well, the media does.
Or the media.
media
I think the media does.
I thought of some names too, like the RSVP killer. Said, I don't have time to kill you today. I'll be back tomorrow.
Here's my card. Call me if I don't call you.
Or the KFC killer kills you, puts you in a bucket. Tom, there's so many that. Okay, I just gave you time.
The mind of a killer over here. Killer comedian.
Thanks for filling in.
You found it. I was saying, I'm being serious, but the names though are. It's kind of. You think about these, the names
They're
come
catchy,
up with. Yeah.
right? Because they stay in your public consciousness.
Right. BTK, the bind, torture, kill.
Like you package it and
How
sell
about
it.
this? See if you can remember this one. How about the scorecard killer?
No.
Scorecard killer.
Which he kept, how many he killed?
Yes. The regular scorecard.
Like a golf scorecard or something? Or just
like
If he had 1, 2, he's at 4, so he puts a scorecard.
Randy Kraft probably killed 67 verified, mainly Orange County. Things got hot in Orange County. We got interested in their task force because of all of these other cases were going down at the same time. Randy Kraft is a little crafty himself.
Right, 67.
Things were getting so hot that after he'd been doing this for a while, he killed twice and had a dumping spot right over here on the Hollywood Freeway at the Echo Park off-ramp, on the off-ramp. 2 different young boys, victims, after he had his way with them, strangled them, killed them. He dumped them on that off-ramp, and both of them were found by Caltrans workers. They had been dumped like 2 or 3 weeks apart, killed in different spots. So he used the same dumping ground at different times and got away with it, and they didn't find the first body until the Caltrans group was cleaning up the off-ramp, and they found the second one. But he got all his victims in Orange County and other series, and he would torture these victims and dump them in different places. He got stopped by the Highway Patrol down in San Clemente. He was weaving or just some traffic violation. The Highway Patrol stopped him, and there were 2 officers. And the reason they picked him up, he got out of the car and came back, and the one officer's talking to him, and they noticed there's another guy sitting in the front seat. And the officer went up to the guy, and the guy was just sitting. He looked like he was asleep. And he looked a little closer, and he couldn't see his hands. So he opens the door, and the guy almost falls out. He was handcuffed behind, and he had strangulation marks.
He's dead already?
He
or
was
not?
dead. This was his last victim. So they grabbed Randy Kraft and booked him, and they went through the car, and they find this scorecard list. He's keeping a list of, not by name, but score.
Score, right.
Got this one here, this one here. That's how they determined part of the 67 total victims. But Kraft is still alive and on up in death row, as far as I know. But he was a vicious killer. He would tie this one kid to a tree and tortured him before he killed him, cut his testicles, sliced him with broken glass, had sex with him, and then he killed him.
And he's alive in prison, which is amazing because anybody that's normally the pedophile, a killer of kids, is immediately almost killed in prison, right?
Well, yeah, he's a keep-away. Obviously, you got to have keep-aways, and there's a lot of keep-aways in California prisons because
Keep-away is for the audience is
for the other prisoners,
right? He's
keep away from
solitary.
All of those. But everyone has a different story.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
But it's very prolific.
Yeah.
It was then. Again, it's a lot more now, a lot less now than it was before because there were reasons, like I said before, hitchhiking. Most of Bonin's, the freeway killers' victims were hitchhiking. They don't do that anymore.
Yeah.
No.
Did you guys see the movie Law Abiding Citizen?
Yep.
With Gerard Butler. It's really good. So his wife and daughter are murdered. And then he just extracts revenge. He's very patient and he's very methodical and he's very brutal. And it's beautiful. Like he basically saws the limbs off one of this guy, tortures them. It was awesome. Like to see somebody that really deserved that, get it. You've seen this in action for decades. You see the worst of the worst, human scum at its lowest level. You see the what it does to families and victims and everything. And it's just, you can't even fathom it. Listening to his stories, it's hard for us to even fathom. Do these serial killers, Tom, fear dying? Like when they get convicted, are they going to do anything to stay off death row, or do they welcome it since they brought so much death and carnage to others?
Well, we can start with this. I doubt they read the Bible, okay? I doubt they're really into religion. I doubt they even care about anything but themselves and what they want to do. I don't think they think that far. I don't think they really care. That's part of being a sociopath. You don't care. It's also very strongly being a narcissist got a lot to do with it. And it doesn't matter to them. It just doesn't matter. And as far as the methods of killing, I think they get off on it. How could you be a necrophiliac, pick somebody up, and by the way, what he would do is the trash bag killer, he'd be driving down the streets of the freeway after picking up somebody in L.A. on his way to another county, and the guy would make some remark, where are we going? We're not going to the park. He'd have a handgun, I think it was a 25 or a 32, and when the guy wasn't looking, he'd just reach over and put one in the side of his head and kill him. And then take him out to a dump spot, have sex with the body, and then they'd cut him up, put him in a trash bag, pick up the trash bag and take it out and usually dump it near a freeway or a deserted road somewhere.
Is this like Hermosa Beach, Redondo Beach, Manhattan Beach?
Yes, that's where he got some of his victims.
That's where I live.
Yeah, well.
I know it's crazy to think how many killers have gone down the 405 right where you live, or down Rosecrans or Sepulveda.
Kearney realized, though, that each one of those cities you named has their own police department.
Exactly.
And there's L.A., and there's L.A. sheriffs. They don't talk. They don't talk. So I'm going to get some out of LAPD, out of MacArthur Park. I think his last 4 or 5 victims were MacArthur Park, but we find them out in Riverside County.
So, Tom, you were on the detective force for how many years, detective?
I was on the job for 29 years, but I worked homicide for 22 of those years.
Okay, so throughout the entire time, besides the phone call that I heard, you have to tell a family, that was the most impactful for me when I overheard you talking to Nicole's mother on the phone, and with Denise in the background shouting. Everybody saw that in that Netflix series, and I was in the other room at OJ's house. Besides that call, do you have, I guess, nightmares or these feelings of making the call to any family of the deceased, and just how you get? I mean, it's got to play in your mind because it's just the emotions of the other end.
Okay, that was the first time and the only time I've made a death notification over the phone. And I think I've explained why I did it that way, because the media would have been there first. I did not want to do that. I felt horrible doing that.
Right.
But if I hadn't done that, that would cause more problems. That was one of the hardest things it did. I have made several death notifications to
in
families
person. Yeah.
in person.
What? So it's a knock on the door by yourself or with your partner?
Sometimes alone, sometimes with a partner. I remember probably the first one that I made was actually from a traffic accident. And I was working in the Van Nuys division. And a carload of teenagers went over the side of a hill of the freeway. 3 of them were killed. I had to make 3 death notifications in the same night. That was tough.
And so you
Don't live with
you have to prepare. You have to
Well,
emotionally.
There's no way to prepare.
Detach yourself somehow. I
But
guess.
going
no
up
way
to the
to
door,
prepare.
it's like you have to run
Well,
through. Like it's just
Let me just say this. I came on the job. I've had a lot of experience with death, and it's nothing I brag about.
No,
I'm not
no.
proud of it. In fact, I'm everything but proud of it. But I've had a lot of experience with death. It's as simple as that. And you have to look at that as simple as this. What am I going to do? What's the best way to do this?
Right.
Do I want to drag it out and say, yeah, I want to talk to you, but I just feel so bad?
Right.
No. You said, I've got something to tell you, and I feel horrible about doing this personally. But something horrible has happened to so-and-so.
right.
Something like, get it out. Don't play with it.
Right.
If you can do that, forget about it and move on, because tomorrow's going to be something else.
Mm-hmm.
You can't
You just
thrive.
just
You
say
can't
it.
do it in any of this stuff. You got to move on.
Right.
Wow.
Which is people don't realize is probably the most difficult part of your job.
Well, it would be emotionally at
Yeah,
that time. But
emotionally.
again, if you don't want to do that, then don't do the job. You don't
Right.
have to do that.
Right.
That's why it takes a special person to be able to do that. So, Kato, you lived in LA probably 10 years before OJ, right? 8, 9?
Oh, yeah,
Like, because you've had
yeah.
your SAG card for over 40 years,
Yeah,
42,
40
44
years,
years.
yeah.
So early 80s. Tom, you were, started on the force in 1967, started your covering or solving serial killer cases or investigating them in the 70s. So forever. Describe the level of panic that there was here in LA, just in general, when multiple serial killers running around. Could you feel it? Was it palpable? I'm sure the media was pumping it. And then you got the crazy ones. You got the Night Stalker, and you have all these high-profile ones. Hillside Strangler. They have these ominous names. Was there real fear throughout Southern California during this time?
There was, to some extent. The Ramirez case, the Night Stalker, probably highlighted that. Now, that was a case, we had I believe 2 victims. Most of those cases were handled by the LA sheriffs who headed up the investigation. Our people worked with them. Gil Carrillo, I think, from the sheriffs handled those. Outstanding cop, outstanding investigator. That was probably the one that the media really took off on. Again, we had 3 working Skid Row. They just don't care about Skid Row transients.
Mm-hmm.
People with problems with alcohol and everything, they don't really care. So that was kind of pushed aside. The Hillside was another one. You get young women getting taken, humiliated, and violated every way you can violate a human being, and then their nude bodies thrown on the hillsides. That was a terrible one that they really was tough. Those types of some of them hit home, some of them don't. The Sunset Strip killers, Bundy and Clark. Do they really care? They pick up a prostitute or a trick and kill them? Not really. That doesn't bother me because I don't go down there, right? I don't. In fact, the prostitutes in the South End, I don't go down to the South End and I don't go to a prostitute. That doesn't bother me. It's only if I'm involved. Hillside, it's pretty close.
Right.
We have a woman and a good friend of mine, homicide investigator, who just retired, outstanding investigator, who was raised in East LA right at the same time as the Hillside Strangler was going on, right in her neighborhood.
Mm-hmm.
And she was like 9 years old then. This prompted her to join the police department. She wasn't frightened of being attacked, but 2 young girls her age were murdered also by the hillside and dumped near where she lived. She had some fear, but she was more curious about all of this. So she became a cop, and then she became a homicide cop, and she retired as a cold case detective, outstanding detective. She is not in fear of any of this because she just is fascinated by the job. And when you do a good job, you start solving these 40-year-old, before we retired, solved a 42-year-old case. 42 years old. And they worked their ass off and they solved this case. That's big stuff.
Yeah.
You never hear about that. You've got to want to do this job or you're not going to do it properly.
Right.
And most people don't want to do it.
But with the media, with Tom, what you're saying is I remember the Night Stalker, and I would look at the windows to make sure everything's closed and everything's locked. I
'Cause it
still
was so
do today.
random, right? He
Yeah,
could
it was
strike
just
anywhere.
he looked for the open window. It was kind of
Yeah.
like a hit and miss. The guy was locked. I'll go to the next house. So I think not just me, but I think everybody, because it was huge news in LA. And it was a story.
It's in your face.
Yeah. And so you think about it, it's so close to you, you think, could it happen to me? Well, I'm sure the people that got killed were thinking, could it happen to me? And
Yeah.
it happened to them.
Yeah. those types of things. Even the La Bianca killings. See, these another Night Stalker thing. It'll go back to Manson, 1969. He'd send his people out in the middle of the night, and they'd go into he went into La Bianca's house and killed them.
Yep.
That hits closer to home. I think people were more concerned with that type of things happening because these other killers we're talking about. You would have to go out of your way to become involved with that.
Right.
And if it doesn't involve me personally, I'm sorry that these things are happening, but I'm just not going to get involved.
Yeah.
I really don't care. I got more important things going on in my life. Type of thing.
Yeah, it was the randomness. Any part of the city, any age victim, didn't matter. And then just, like you said, coming into open windows, kicking a door down, following somebody. And then when they had the description of him and how creepy he looked and everything, it just built on itself.
When you were saying that we'll be doing other cases and all that, so I do want to. We're not going to get into the Hillside Stranglers today, right?
No,
because I don't want to. But just so you answer this question, they were auto repair guys, right?
Yeah.
Okay. That's all I want to know.
Okay.
Make sure I'm getting
my
serial
upholstery, auto upholstery shop,
out of Glendale.
Which
is
close to
close.
Glendale. Right? Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. 2 guys.
That one actually is. They're all fascinating.
The Bono and Bianchi you're talking about.
Yep.
Yeah.
Bono was kind of the head of that duo, but Bianchi wanted to be an LA cop. And in the middle of these killings, Bianchi took a ride along with the LAPD.
In the middle of the killings.
The person who drove him around, I happen to know, good person. We were doing that, taking young men around who might want to be cops and showing them what a cop car is like. And it was in Northeast Division. And he actually wanted to go see some of the drop spots. He said, "Do you know where the Hillside Strangler, some of the victims were?" Bono was telling us to the cop.
The red flag or the cop you knew? Is there something like this guy was strange?
The cop said, "Well, I can't really.
Yeah.
I can't take you by there. We're not
You're not a
here to
cop
do
yet,
that."
dude.
Yeah.
No, it's so cool. But he's doing this. Talk about a set of nuts, okay? And right in the middle of these killings, he'd like to be taken by the cop to his own drop sites.
Nobody knows that story. Nobody would know
That's
that
incredible.
story. That he's a ride along.
But the same guy, we had one killer in Glendale, I think it was, and Bianchi was a suspect. LAPD had him as a suspect. Orange County had him as a suspect. And Glendale was looking at him as a suspect. Glendale or Burbank. Because the victim was right across the hallway from where he lived or stayed at for some time. So he was being looked at as a suspect. This was after this ride-along. Nobody knew it. LAPD, Orange County,
Right, because they didn't
never
communicate.
talked.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't share information.
How do you go? How do you
Right in the
go
middle of
about
this.
getting ride-alongs? Does the guy just go down there and go, "Hey"?
Well, it's
It
probably
used
a
to be a lot
community outreach
easier.
thing, right?
He was a young-looking, good-looking guy, clean cut,
Yeah.
very bright. Sure as hell didn't look like a serial killer. Well, what does a serial killer look like? I've got that right here. I mean,
Wait, that's a picture of Tom.
yeah. Here's your serial killers right here. The myth, the guy with a hatchet, and his reality right here.
Yeah.
All right,
We go there.
that's reality right here.
There's the reality there. A GQ model.
Okay. There he is. That's
Yeah,
Bono,
exactly. Ted
Bianco
Bundy.
right there.
Ted Bundy, too.
So you look at him. Yeah, I'll take him around for 30 minutes. And I'll show him. He can listen to the radio. We'll go to a couple of calls.
But that's fascinating. I mean, we'll get into it more, but that's the fascinating story that I don't think anybody, you know it, but I don't think, did you know that? I mean,
I don't think I did. That he actually asked for the ride along
how
and wanted to
close
know
they
where
are
the drop
to having
sites were.
the actual killer in the car.
We got thousands of victims here from serial killers all over the country. Thousands. And these mostly were done in the 70s, 80s, and the 90s. That's when serial killing was at its peak. There's clearly monsters like this that are horrible and had horrible upbringings and would fit that profile back in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. What are those people doing now since it's so hard to get away with serial killing? How is this coming out for people that are just like that but living now where you can't really get away with serial killing?
You know about the suspects?
Yeah, I'm talking about like people like that are alive now, not these guys, but
Most of these are gone now. They're all dead, most of them.
right. So I'm saying there's someone that grows up now that if they had grown up back then had the tendencies to be a serial killer, right? And
Like
then,
the Dahmer thing, when you start with dogs or whatever.
yeah, whatever. But
What is the-
But now it's hard to get away with serial killing because of technology.
Yeah.
So are these people lashing out, killing one time, getting caught, maybe, or killing a family member?
Again, probably all of the above. It's sooner or later we got to look at statistics. Murders are down. Serial killing murders are down. A lot of it can be attributed to DNA long term, I think. The fact that everybody's got a camera, everybody's got a
technology.
phone, it's technology.
Yeah.
How many young kids hitchhike today? They don't.
Yeah.
Back then it was a death sentence. You'd have half the victims if there was no such thing as hitchhiking. The weather out here is perfect. You got all sorts of dump spots. There's all sorts of reasons for these things to happen.
Right.
Do people do it? I don't know. They've got their own little personal demons in their head. Who knows?
Right.
It's not important. It's not our job to figure out why. It's our job to figure out what and who and get the evidence together and find out who did this. The rest of it is up to somebody else.
You're right. Nobody knows that. My wife and I went to Tahoe last year, and I said we were at the wrong spot to see one of the sites up in the beautiful lakes. And I said, they go, the Uber dropped us off. And so it was like wrong site. I said, it's over there. It's only 4 miles. Do you want to hitchhike? And she goes, what's that? I go, that's that. You've never seen that. So we had no reception. We had no way of getting, because.
Oh, even a better reason to do it.
Yeah. So she goes, okay. So we put them like this. But I saw someone said, give it a ride. And it was a family, so we were safe.
Did they know
A family of serial killers.
Hey, did they know they were driving Kato Kalin?
Yeah, in the car we did. It was hysterical.
What are the odds? Kato Kalin gets finished up by a serial killer.
But that's so funny because nobody know. Look, growing up in Milwaukee, I just remember everybody hitchhiked.
Yeah.
Everybody would go. Yeah. It's the old thumb. You just would do it. And then my parents would say, don't you ever hitchhike.
Right.
Look at all of these kids here that did that.
Yeah.
Probably 6 or 8 of these serial killers, was part of their MO, hitchhikers.
Yeah.
Tom, I've always wanted to ask you this question. Did you have any involvement in the Menendez murders? Were you part of it at all?
No, that was actually in Beverly Hills. Beverly Hills PD had that case.
Okay.
I'm familiar with the judge.
What do you think?
Interesting story there, but it's another story in another case. He used to be a DA, Stan Weisberg.
Okay.
He was the judge for the murder trial?
He was the judge for Menendez.
In the second one?
He might have been the second one.
Yeah.
But he had several bigger cases than that, too. But I had him as a DA, and it's a funny story. I wouldn't have to get into it.
Okay. What's your thought on that? Because there's a chance they could get out. Do you know anything about that? Or
Well, it depends on how you look at it, whether they justify it and do it. No. I can look at that case and say, the father, I'll get back at the father, but why the mother? What threat was the mother? I know she alluded to certain things and went along with her husband, but why murder her in the way that they murdered her? If they hadn't killed her, I probably would have said, well, I can understand them wanting to perhaps be paroled. Maybe. But once you slaughter the mother for no reason, and the way they did it, no, they shouldn't be getting out at all.
Yeah, well, now with the new DA, things have changed.
Well, you've got a DA who actually wants to be a DA.
Exactly.
He's filing criminal cases. He's prosecuting criminals. You didn't have that
with Gascon.
The former DA.
Yeah,
Gascon,
that's true.
Unfortunately, was a former LA cop.
Hard to believe.
You didn't know that?
No.
Yeah, can you believe that,
He's
Kato?
a commander, LAPD commander.
Yeah. And not related to the point of information guy that was doing the announcement during when OJ was on the run.
Right.
They're not related.
No, they're
I thought they were
same name, but
name.
not related.
The same last name?
Yeah.
I wonder if people know, because I know the one that puts OJ as a fugitive of the law, his name was Gascon.
Gascon.
Yeah.
And
not
George
related.
Gascon is the
Former cop.
crappy DA. Right,
Well,
but he was
commander.
but he was in San Francisco as a DA where he got
He was
real
there first in San
liberalized.
Francisco, but he retired out of LA. Now, he's got an interesting story again. They all have stories. He was mistreated as a young man when the LAPD pulled him over. They were wrong when they pulled him over. They got stupid. They ripped his car apart. Some cops do stupid things, and they pay the price. They ripped his. He was with his girlfriend. They tore his car apart looking for dope. They found maybe a hint of marijuana or some stupid thing. They got really stupid about it. Trashed his car, embarrassed him in front of his girlfriend, and left. He tells this story. And the way he tells it, you know, that he had a grudge against LAPD.
Right.
So what did he do? He became LAPD.
Yeah.
And then he promoted very highly. And then he ends up doing what he did. Not a surprise.
Well,
wow.
I wonder if he got his payback then.
Well, in
Good
his mind,
Lord.
maybe he did.
I bet the morale at LAPD had to be so bad for those 4 years. It just had to be devastating.
It was. It's better now. I think the mayor made a very good choice. Jimmy McDonald, if you searched the entire country, you couldn't find someone more qualified than Jim McDonald. He's just an outstanding cop. As a detective, we worked with him a little bit. He was in robbery homicide for a little while. He has the administrative background of the sheriff's department with Long Beach PD. He was a chief down there. He was a sheriff here. Outstanding selection. He's good for morale. It's going to be a test on him, though, to see if these PC stops, probable cause stops, come back, because nobody chases anybody anymore. They terminate pursuits.
So he's
don't follow up.
I thought it was Hockman. No, is that?
Well, Hockman's the DA.
Hockman's the new DA.
Yeah.
And Jimmy is who? Jimmy
Police
McDonald.
Chief of
Oh,
police.
the chief of police.
Yeah.
Okay, that's
of
it.
L.A.
Okay,
And
they'll work hand in hand. Those guys are probably, very tight.
I'm sure they do. But he's just an outstanding pick. So we'll see if there's a chance. I've got son-in-law on the job, and I know several people that are still on the job. They're very hopeful
Oh, good.
that he will turn things around, and he's the most qualified you could possibly have in that position.
Do you think it's a lot harder being a cop now than when you started?
In some ways, yes, and others, no. You talk to young cops today, and I did when I was instructing. At the time I retired, I talked to a lot of young cops, and you tell them stories that they look at you like, is that true? Like I tell a story about before all of this DNA stuff with all these murders, I was working downtown Central Division. We get a call on a Saturday night, late on a Saturday night, of a body found on the east side of L.A. in an industrial area. A young Hispanic kid, been beaten, slashed, cut with a knife, and he's lying in an alley. That night, I'm working with a partner. We had one police car. If you're on call, you're on call. You got to be ready to go to these things. So you get in your own personal car, you go down to the police station, you meet up with your partner, and you go out to the scene. Central Division is the smallest geographical division in the city, but a lot is going on, including Skid Row, where we had a lot of these serial killings later.
Mm-hmm.
This night we had 3 murders in one night, just in the Central Division. My partner is at one of them. We gave Detective Headquarters another one, and I'm at the 3rd murder. I get dropped off at the scene. It's me, my clipboard, and a flashlight, and that's it. No cell phone. No communications.
No gun?
I have a gun.
Okay.
That really doesn't fit into the investigation, but it's good to have a gun.
Good, I was going to say, I go, you're in an area that
You might have one now,
You want to
Dave.
have a
If
gun.
you're
There's
a
3
cop-
killings that night.
Yeah.
Don't make it 4.
Yeah, if you want to have you want to keep a gun handy. So they drop me off. This is my crime scene. 3 a.m. now on a Sunday morning, and there's nobody around except me, my clipboard, and a dead kid. Okay? He's not identified. He's obviously been in a fight. Down the alley a little bit, there's a bar that just has Hispanic kids going in and out of it, drinking and everything else. Probably a fight on a Saturday night, and he lost.
Yeah.
He's lying there all bloody and messy. Everything else. There's some broken glass. There's a little blood trail around in there. There's a minimal crime scene, but enough to photograph. So I've requested photographs. I've already got a first call in for coroner. You make what's called a first call. You say, this is what I got. I'll call you a second call when I need you to come and do your own investigation. Because at a murder scene, you investigate, then the coroner investigates, does their own. So I've got all that done. I get dropped there. The photographer shows up. Now it's just me and the photographer. So I have him shoot the scene, shoot the body, everything else. His job is done. He gets in and goes out to the next call. It's a busy Saturday night in L.A.
Sunday morning.
Yeah. So now the sun is beginning to come up. I've got my notes. I'm doing the crime scene. Today, if you do a homicide crime scene and you're a homicide cop, it's rare because you have a criminalist who will come out and join you and help you because of things like DNA, which is a great idea.
Mm-hmm.
Trace evidence, hairs, fibers, blood trails. You want a criminalist there if you can go. We didn't have criminalists back then. You had me in my book. That's it.
Right. Did you solve it?
Let me get to the bottom of this. I'm getting there, kid.
I
I'm getting
know.
there.
So you got me at the edge of my seat
Here
here.
it
I want to
goes.
see if you went to that bar. Is that where? What? You
Bar
me
was
here.
closed. Nobody's around. No witnesses. It was an anonymous call.
Right.
Just a body, and they hung up. All right, that's it. We got nothing. Bar is closed. Nobody is around. Sun starts to come up. This kid doesn't have identification on him. When the coroner shows up, we find that out. So he's a John Doe. The sun is coming up. I'm waiting for the coroner. The coroner's office is probably just a mile away. It's not that far.
Mm-hmm.
It's near Mission Road. It's on Mission Road. So I'm waiting. I've got all my stuff done, and here comes the coroner's wagon. We're going to pick this kid up. They're going to do their own investigation, take their own photographs. We're going to wrap him up, put him in the wagon, he's gone. These wagons, the coroner's wagons, then held generally 4 bodies, 2 down, 2 up. The coroner's wagon comes, and they pull up, and he backs up towards the body into the alley, and I look at him, and I say, good, finally going to get out of here. My partner's going to come and pick me up. And I'm looking around at the scene. Did I get everything? Did I miss everything? Now that it's light, I can see better. No, nothing here. I got everything looks good. The coroner comes. We're gonna go do essentially another investigation. So I'm gonna write notes from what he finds because he's gonna go through the body, turn him over, more photographs, and all that. So he backs up, and I'm looking over here, and then he gets out of the car. I hear the door slam, and I hear the rear of the cart opening up, and then I hear, oh shit! And it's what's the matter? So I go, he says, I got no room. I look inside, it's packed with bodies. He's been going from one murder to the next. He just forgot where he was. He's on his way back to the coroner's office a mile away. When he gets this call, we don't have room for the body because there's already 4 of them in there.
Insane.
From that night. Not all murders, a couple of them were, but they were coroner cases.
Right.
The coroner takes a lot of cases. You go to the coroner's office on a Sunday morning when there were a lot of autopsies, you get them 2 and 3 on a gurney. They don't even have enough gurneys. Couldn't get them in there. So he says, well, what we can do, we'll wrap them. This is before DNA, before people worried about little things like that. So we'll wrap them and we'll stick them in between the 2 and the bottom. Well, that'll get them because it's only a mile away. Yeah. So that's what we did. And we got a little kid in there in the back. Never ID'd him, never solved. Nobody had anything to do with this. Those are the types of cases you can't do anything with. He was probably illegal, came across the border. Maybe he had a job, maybe he didn't. He got in a fight with the wrong people. He'd been drinking, obviously. The toxicology showed that. But we weren't able to identify him, again, because he wasn't here illegally. Back then, the police departments today don't want to get involved in INS types of things. They didn't back then either. So there wasn't a whole lot of investigation goes on to those type of things.
Right.
If this were a serial killer, we would go on and be linking it with someone else. But it was these types of cases. And I'm explaining this to these young kids who are cops. They look at me, you didn't have a phone? No, I didn't even have a phone booth.
Yeah.
I had to wait for my partner, and hopefully he's going to show up.
Right.
You didn't have this, you didn't have that. No, that's the way we handle murders.
The horrible thing is that the kids, besides the kid dead, is that obviously someone knew or a few people knew.
Well, yeah. And by the way, that's in the book. And just don't throw that.
And that's another just snapshot on one night too, right?
Well, yeah, that's
another
Saturday,
victim.
Saturday night, drink night, bars, fights.
The underbelly of Los Angeles.
Killings,
He
whatever.
lost.
Yeah.
And that's the result. But those things today, you ask if things are different. Yeah, they're different.
No kidding. And to think it's the way those kids were looking at it, that's like 200 years ago. It's like their parents' lifetime ago. It's not that long ago. You know what I mean? So cops that started in the 80s have seen a lot of change, haven't they? If they're still on the force now. And
when I talk to these kids, and I like to say something that's kind of cute, to get their interest.
Yeah.
So I was looking out at this college group once kids are 19, 20 years old. I'm looking out there, and I started laughing to myself, and I said, I'm Tom Lange, and I retired and all this other stuff. He said, I'm looking out at the crowd here, and I was going to tell you that I came on the job before any of you guys were retired, and I got to thinking, I came on the job before your parents were born.
Jesus.
Reality check. Yeah.
I'm going to speak to that camera. If you think you have a question for Tom Lange, because Tom's going to join us again, right?
Yeah.
If you have a question for Tom, and what do you think of Tom on our show? We always get great numbers, so it's great having Tom here in person. We thank Tom, but if you have questions, comments, he'll read them. So
send them. Yeah, we have Tom.
And if you have clues too, if you know anything about
right. We can help solve
unsolved
some cases from the 70s. Hey, this has been amazing. Amazing storytelling, amazing information. People are fascinated by this, always will be. And the fact that you were there in the trenches for so much of this and made such a huge difference. Tom, really appreciate you being here. And we'll see you again.
All right, thanks for having me.
We'll have lunch. We'll have a good time.
Yes.
And we're going to talk about the Wonderland murders, the Hillside Strangler, and a few others. So we got a lot more to get to. Like Kato said, comments, subscribe to the channel if you haven't. Listen to our audio podcast as well. You want to pick through this a couple times because there was so much info from Tom today. For the one and only Kato Kalin. For the one and only
You got it.
legendary
My
Tom
pleasure.
Lange. I'm just
Always
happy to
good.
be
Good to
here.
see you,
Tom
Good to see
Zenner.
you, Tom.
We will catch you very soon.